Okay, let's begin with the word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful, Lord, for this morning, for all your blessings, for the time to study together. We ask for your Holy Spirit to be here to guide and direct this study and help us to understand the truths for this time. May your Holy Spirit work upon each heart, bringing conviction and power in their lives. Thank you for hearing our prayer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, good morning, everyone. As you can see, we're going to start on Jeff's notes from book 3. Now, as far as trying to date these notes to figure out exactly when they were made, it appears that they would be the year 2000. And that's going to be very significant based upon the subject matter that we're going to be looking at here, the 3 woes. The last section is definitely written in the summer of 2000 because he talks about events that are going to be happening in August of 2000, and he's quoting from contemporary materials from the beginning of the year 2000. So these early notebooks of Jeff's, where he would travel around doing presentations in different churches, Central America, places like that, give us a real insight into the foundation of this message. And one of the things that's interesting here in this notebook is what he says about Islam. Now, he did these presentations in 2000, but never really revisited the subject until much later. And mostly what he was doing here was giving a foundation of Adventism in regard to the 7 trumpets, and specifically the 3 woes. So later on, after 9/11, it took them time to actually go back to this topic again. Now, we're going to find that some interesting statements to start out. Now, he's going to, as we've noticed before, Jeff is always looking at the coming Sunday law. And that's the main intent of looking at the 3 woes. He wants to understand about the coming Sunday law, which he believes is going to be soon, that it's imminent. But he hasn't had 9/11 happen yet. And it's hard to understand what he exactly thought was going to happen with Islam, other than that he believed that Islam was going to be involved in some kind of war. But he doesn't go into details, other than that he believed that the United States would be attacked by Islam. And yet, after 9/11, it took them a number of years to really come to grips with the understanding of the 3rd woe. So we're just going to start reading here, and anybody who wants to comment on this, feel free to comment. But you're going to see that the things that he's talking about are really things that are occurring now. And of course, he's going to start with a lot of Spirit of Prophecy quotes. A great crisis awaits the people of God. A great crisis awaits the world. The most momentous struggle of all the ages is before us. Events which for more than half a century we have, upon the authority of the prophetic word, declared to be impending, are now taking place before our eyes. An amendment to the Constitution restricting liberty of conscience has long been urged upon the legislators of the nation. And the question of enforcing Sunday observance has become one of national importance. Are we ready for the issue involved in the Sunday movement? Now, the thing that's interesting here is in the year 2000, Jeff is looking back at what was happening in early Adventist history. Well, I mean, not really early. This would be, remember correctly, this was, 1900. So Signs of the Times, 1900. And that was happening in 1900. This had been going on for a while, the issue of Sunday. And this was definitely in the news in the 1990s. So 90 years later, you have the same issues arising, or 100 years later. And so, because this is in the year 2000, so it's 100 years after. But what happened with 9/11 is that these things, even though they were happening in darkness, they sort of were. 9/11 changed things, and that's one of the things that I think we'll see as we go through these notes. But we can see that there are parallels to what the Sunday law was in our time regarding the Constitution and liberty of conscience. Many who are working for Sunday enforcement have never understood the claims of the Bible Sabbath and the false foundation on which the Sunday institution rests. And they are blinded to the results of Sunday legislation. They do not see that it would be a blow against religious liberty. But any movement in favor of a religious legislation is really an act of concession to the papacy, which for so many ages has steadily warred against liberty of conscience. Sunday owes its existence as a so-called Christian institution to the mystery of iniquity, and its enforcement will be a virtual recognition of principles which are the very cornerstone of Romanism. So, what are the principles that are the very cornerstone of Romanism?
Do as I say, because.
Right. So Rome is opposed to liberty of conscience.
Most definitely.
Mm-hmm. And
agreed.
And in the book I read, Ecclesiastical Megalomania, talking about Rome's views of capitalism and so forth. I mean, that's why they're opposed to it, because it's about liberty of conscience. Rome believes that it needs to control the world, and that's its goal. The United States was raised in opposition to Rome. It's a Protestant nation. It's not just a Christian nation. Its constitution was based upon the principles of Protestantism, of separation of church and state, of freedom and the value of the individual. So when our nation shall so abjure the principles of its government as to enact a Sunday law, Protestantism will in this act join hands with the papacy. It will be giving life to the tyranny which has long been eagerly watching its opportunity to spring again into active despotism. As this struggle progresses, it may appear to human sight that Satan is triumphant and that truth is overborne with falsehood and error. In the country which has been an asylum for the conscience-oppressed servants of God and defenders of his truth, religious freedom may be placed in jeopardy, and the people over whom God has spread his shield may meet suffering and trial. But God would have us recall his dealings with his people in the past to save them from their enemies and to trust in him. He has always chosen extremities when there seemed no possible hope for deliverance from Satan's workings for the display of his power. Man's necessity is God's opportunity. While the Protestant world is making concessions to Rome and danger is increasing on every hand, let us arouse to comprehend the situation and to see the contest before us in its true bearings. Let the watchman lift up the voice and give with clearness the message which is present truth for this time. For if the trumpet give a uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself to the battle? Let us show the people where we are in prophetic history and seek to arouse the spirit of true Protestantism, awaking the world to a sense of the value of the religious liberty they have so long enjoyed. Now, what and I can't help but make a comparison to what's happening now. I'm sure all of your minds are going there. How is what's happening today connected with what Ellen White's talking about in 1900?
Rome does not like the rule of law. They want people to bend to whatever their pronouncements are.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Because Rome is opposed to republicanism.
Very much they hate republicanism.
Now, one of the problems that we have had is in trying to understand how the Sunday law comes about. Now, if you go back to the 1990s, we definitely saw the moral majority on the rise, becoming a political force. And back then the language was about, family and, family values. This idea was very prominent. And included in that was them being able to get one day off a week from work, which would be Sunday, supposedly so they could go to church and then watch football. But I never quite understood why football's okay on Sunday. But anyway, so what you have is this push in the 1990s, but 9/11 stopped that. But we're going to see that what we have today, is a little more complex than what we thought in the past. So we believe that the Republican Party would be connected to this moral majority, because that's the way it seemed, and that it would be a Republican government that would push the Sunday law. But it's a little more complicated than that, and we see that right now in the United States, the Democratic Party is really trampling upon freedom of conscience. And in this area of vaccines, are religious exemptions being taken into account? Can a person use religious exemptions to not get vaccinated? We know churches are trying to do that. Are they successful in that at this point?
Not so much.
Yeah. And why is that? Why wouldn't automatically people have a religious exemption?
I think probably fear, and they want control.
Okay. So we know what the Constitution says and we know what the law says. But in this situation, is the law and the Constitution being followed?
Neither are being followed.
Right. So I remember back in the 90s, the discussion regarding the Constitution, because Ellen White does make a statement about the Constitution being changed, that the legislative bodies will make a change to the Constitution. But it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. That is, there has to be a political will and also a support from the people in order for that to occur. And so the question is, how would that come about? Where would this push come from? How could they just set aside the Constitution? So part of what I find as I've read through this is we can see the parallels to today on how that begins. So it begins somewhere, and it begins with a situation like we have with this pandemic. And of course, it's not about what's true, because none of this is even based on science. It's all political. And on both sides of the issue, really. There's a lot of politics being played over a health issue that really even shouldn't be a major issue. Anyway, let's go on and read. This is from General Conference Bulletin, 1895 General Conference Bulletin, March 4th. In these times of special interest, the guardians of the flock of God should teach the people that the spiritual powers are in controversy. It is not human beings that are creating such intensity of feelings as now exists in the religious world. A power from Satan's spiritual synagogue is infusing the religious elements of the world, arousing men to decided action to press the advantages Satan has gained by leading the religious world in determined warfare against those who make the word of God their guide and the sole foundation of doctrine. Satan's masterly efforts are now put forth to gather in every principle and every power that he can employ to controvert the binding claims of the law of Jehovah, especially the fourth commandment that defies who is the creator of the heavens and the earth. So do we presently see the war being fought over Saturday-Sunday issue?
No.
Nope.
But we do see the same type of war that she's talking about here. Same type of power. It's just that it's not apparently about the Sabbath and Sunday. Now, there's this discussion in this movement is what's happening, the Sunday law. And I've taken the position that it's a type of the Sunday law and a preparation for the Sunday law, but that it's not the test itself. But we can see that there is all kinds of people opposed to what's happening of all different stripes for various different reasons. And the question is, how is that going to unfold as time goes on? How is that going to divide the issues? And how is it going to lead to a Sunday law? Is the Sunday law going to be part of a backlash? Or is it going to be something that naturally evolves from what's happening? So that's kind of the question that we really don't have answered at this point. The Bible is its own expositor. Scripture is to be compared with Scripture. The student should learn to view the word as a whole and see the relation of its parts. He should gain knowledge of its grand central theme, of God's original purpose for the world, and of the rise of the great controversy, and of the work of redemption. He should understand the nature of the two principles that are contending for supremacy, and should learn to trace their working through the records of history and prophecy to the great consummation. He should see how this controversy enters into every phase of human experience, how in every act of life he himself reveals the one or the other of the two antagonistic motives, and how, whether he will or not, he is now, or even now, deciding upon which side of the controversy he will be found. So what are the two great principles, or the two principles that are contending for supremacy?
Well, if we think back to Cain and Abel,
Okay.
so Abel was following the sacrifice that God had sort of that was understood anyway, that it was meant to be a sacrifice by blood.
Mhm.
And Abel was worshipping God by his own methods.
Okay. So what
is following God's ways or worshipping a God, your own methods?
Okay, so one would be self rules, and the other is God rules.
Yes.
Yeah, so within the individual. So those are the principles. And now, how does the papacy relate to the idea of self when they are actually asking for obedience to the papacy. How is obedience to the papacy based on the principle of worship of self?
It's by doing what seems right in your own eyes and the conversation and conclusions that they provide for you.
Okay. Okay, well, let's go on and read. This is from the Upward Look, 277, so it's obviously from some manuscript, I would think. All are to hear the last message of warning. The prophecies in the book of Revelation, chapter 12 to 18, are being fulfilled. In the 18th chapter is recorded the very last call to the churches. Now, this call is now to be given. In the 19th chapter, the time is pictured when the beast and the false prophet are taken and cast into the lake of fire. The dragon, who was the instigator of the great rebellion against heaven, is bound and cast into the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. Then follows the resurrection of the wicked and the final destruction of Satan and all the wicked, and the final triumph and reign of Christ in this earth. The powers of Satan are mustering for battle. Stern conflicts are before us. Press together, my brethren and sisters, press together. Bind up with Christ. Say ye not a confederacy. Neither fear ye their fear, nor be afraid. Sanctify the Lord of hosts himself, and let him be your fear, and let him be your dread. And he shall be for a sanctuary to his people, but for a stone of stumbling, and for a rock of offense to both the houses of Israel, for a gin and for a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And many among them shall stumble and fall and be broken and snared and taken. I am instructed to say to those who know the truth, bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples. And I will wait upon the Lord that hideth his face from the house of Jacob, and will look for him. Behold, I and the children whom the Lord hath given me are for signs and for wonders in Israel, from the Lord of hosts, which dwelleth in Mount Zion. And when they shall say unto you, seek unto them that have familiar spirits, and unto wizards that peep and that mutter, should not a people seek unto their God, for the living to the dead, to the law and to the testimony? If they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. Now, Ellen White is quoting where? Where is she? Where are these quotes from?
That's from Isaiah.
Okay.
Is it chapter 8?
I don't think it's Isaiah 8. It would be Isaiah 28, wouldn't it be? Is it Isaiah? Yeah. Yeah, this is in Isaiah 28. Dealing with, at least parts of this are, or at least they're similar to this. That's where we get precept upon precept, line upon line. And I'm just trying to find exactly if this is here or not. Here, just hang on. Okay. Because where we got this wizards that peep,
Right.
where's that?
Is that like chapter 2 or something?
Oh, it's chapter 8. You're right. It's Isaiah chapter 8. Okay, that's why. Yeah, it's Isaiah chapter 8. And there's some similarities between chapter 8 and 28. But yeah, it's the last part of chapter 8. This part where, behold, I and the children whom the Lord hath given me, to the law and to the testimony. So this is in the context of what history in Isaiah chapter 8? Remember, yeah, there's this civil war going on in between northern Israel that's Confederate with Syria. So in this part here, I'm just going to switch screens so we can look at this. So when she quotes this here, so this is Isaiah 8 verse 12, say ye not a confederacy to all them whom this people shall say, a confederacy, neither fear ye their fear nor be afraid. What is this talking about, this confederacy? Why does God say through Isaiah to Judah, say ye not a confederacy?
Is this the confederacy with Ephraim and Syria?
Okay, so there is a confederacy going on between Ephraim and Syria, but he's talking to Judah here. So he's talking about here about the coming Assyrian invasion. So let's go back here a bit. So this is where we've got Maher-shalal-Hashbaz. This is going to be a child that's going to be born to Isaiah, and his name is symbolic, and this is going to be written on a mirror. That's called a great roll, but it's a mirror. And then it says, before the child shall have knowledge to cry, my father and my mother, the riches of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria shall be taken away before the king of Assyria. So Assyria is going to come and conquer Syria. Damascus is the capital of Syria, and Samaria is the capital of Ephraim, or northern Israel. And then it says, for the Lord spoke also unto me, saying, for as much as this people refuseth the waters of Shiloh that goes softly, and rejoice in Rezin and Remaliah's son. So these are northern Israel that's being talked about. Now therefore, behold, the Lord bringeth up upon them the waters of the river, strong and many, even the king of Assyria and all his glory. And he shall come up over all his channels and go over all his banks, and he shall pass through Judah. He shall overflow and go over. He shall reach even to the neck, and the stretching out of his wings shall fill the breadth of thy land, O Emmanuel. So what is this talking about here? Just in the plain reading of it.
Yeah, so Assyria is going to conquest Ephraim and Syria.
Yeah.
And it's going to move into Judah and go up to the borders around Jerusalem.
Okay, yeah, so he's not going to take the king captive, right? He shall reach even to the neck. So he's not going to conquer Judah, right? He shall pass through Judah. He shall overflow and go over. Now, of course, this overflowing, what is this talking about then in our application of it? What is the overflowing?
More relates to like the conquest of the papacy, the end of the world.
Okay, so, and it refers to the Sunday law, does it not? Is that how we've applied this overflow?
Well, certainly, yes. Well, but in verse 40, it relates to a conquest of USSR. So there was no Sunday law involved then.
No, I understand. There's no Sunday law involved, but it's a symbol of the Sunday law. Is it not? Every time we look at this overflowing scourge or this overflowing, we can
Yes,
look at it applies to other histories, but it's typifying the Sunday law. At least that's the way I understand it. Would you, anybody?
yeah, I would agree.
Okay. Yeah. Now we applied this, of course, to 1989. Now, was 1989 a Sunday law?
No,
Okay. So why did we apply it to 1989? And can we still do so?
I would
Well,
think
first-
that we'd want to be applying it to our current time. Excuse me.
Okay, it's to our current time. But can we still apply it to 1989?
yes,
Okay, and what's the principle that allows us to do that?
it's the fulfillment of verse 40 of Daniel 11.
Okay, so it's Daniel 11, verse 40, right? So, but there's a principle underneath that. And what's the principle itself? Why can we take this overflowing that we see in Daniel 11, verse 40, and we see it also earlier in Daniel 11, that's in verse 10. Yeah, but his son shall be stirred up and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. So we're taking all these different histories and we're taking this overflowing and this passing through, and we're saying, well, this is about the Sunday law, even though in a lot of this history, it's not dealing with the Sunday law. So why can we apply it to the Sunday law? What's the principle?
Well, in verse 40, the flood, in a sense, seems to continue. He shall also enter into the glorious land.
Okay, there's this continuation. So that is, all the histories of the past are flowing, for lack of a better word, towards one goal. And so we can look at all these different histories and we can see that they're parallel to our time. Now, one thing Jeff taught that Parminder opposed was the idea that each waymark typifies every other waymark. And why is this correct? Why can we say, for instance, 1989 typifies the Sunday law and 9/11 typifies the Sunday law, even though they're not the Sunday law? Why can we do that?
Well, Ellen White, she connects the falling of the great buildings of New York to Revelation 18, 1, 2, 3.
Okay,
And so,
yeah, okay, keep going.
and so we know that Revelation 18, 1 to 4 anyway, relates to the Sunday law as well.
Okay. So Ellen White is connecting events like 9/11 to the Sunday law. So we can see there's a continuous flow of history, that each of these waymarks is an amplification as we approach of this great controversy. And we can see that quite clearly. 1798, is it about the Sunday law?
I would say yes.
Okay, can you explain how?
Well, in 1798, when the power of the papacy was being removed, it was something that was showing that they did not control the world as they thought they did.
Right. And it's sort of almost like a mirror image.
Almost like a chiasm.
Yeah, I mean, really, in a sense, it is a chiasm because we know that. So what we see is that even events such as the taking of the Pope captive typify the Sunday law in sort of a reverse order. Does 538 represent the Sunday law?
A type of Sunday law, yes.
Right. And because the principle is that all of these histories are telling us about the end of the world. And the crisis that we are going to face is the Sunday law. It's the final crisis. But it's connected to the buildings in New York coming down. So this pandemic, how can we relate the pandemic? If we can look at all these other histories that aren't the Sunday law, how can we connect this to what's happening today?
The fear that is out there is setting up the world for the papacy stepping back in to say, we are capable to help run everything in the world, and that you need to listen to us for the good of mankind.
Yeah. Now we're going to see a series of crises, right?
Yes.
And we have had these crises. 9/11 was a crisis. Definitely this pandemic is a crisis, but it's not the last one. It's not the final crisis. It's something that's leading towards that end. And so there will be a reprieve. You know, I don't think it's going to come down to, at least in my view, that they're going to end up putting out people on the street, because that's basically what they would have to do if they're going to all be fired for not taking a vaccine. There's going to be a pushback. But that doesn't mean that these actions aren't leading towards a Sunday law, because they are. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. This is the next thing in our notes here. For they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked, without the robe of Christ's righteousness, and they shall see his shame. So this 3 unclean spirit like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. What is this event? It's the 6th plague, but what is the event?
Armageddon.
Okay, well, Armageddon. What is Armageddon?
The drying up of the papal support for the papacy.
Okay, so there's a drying up of support. So the river Euphrates is dried up. And that's going to make way for Christ to return. But it's also going to be connected with the time of Jacob's trouble and with the death decree connected with the Sunday law, correct?
Yeah, I see the death decree coming in at between the 2nd and 3rd.
You see it between the 2nd and 3rd?
Yeah, the 2nd and 3rd plague. Yes.
Where at the time of Jacob's trouble then?
But what death decree are you talking about? Because is it, I don't know that I could agree that the final death decree for those that remain true to God would be between the second and the third, or at least it wouldn't be enforced then. I can see that it's definitely enforced about this on the sixth plague.
Yeah, so when you look in Spirit of Prophecy, now she makes comparisons to the story of Esther, right? And she talks, so when she's in Prophets and Kings, she's going to talk about this issue. She's going to compare it to what happened with the Jews in the book of Esther. And I'm just looking at other stuff. And here's from the Great Controversy. But it's just the heading. Could men see with heavenly vision? They would behold companies of angels that excel in strength, stationed about those who have kept the word of Christ's patience. With sympathizing tenderness, angels have witnessed their distress and heard their prayers. They are waiting the word of their commander to snatch them from their peril, but they must wait a little longer. The people of God must drink of the cup and be baptized with the baptism. The very delay, so painful to them, is the best answer to their petitions. As they endeavor to await trustingly for the Lord to work, they are led to exercise faith, hope, patience, which have been too little exercised during their religious experience. The heavenly sentinels, faithful to their trust, continue their watch. Though a general decree has fixed the time when the commandment keepers may be put to death, their enemies will in some cases anticipate the decree, and before the time specified will endeavor to take their lives, but none can pass the mighty guardians stationed about every faithful soul. So this to me is the death decree that I would have to connect to the time of Jacob's trouble. But maybe other people see this differently.
My logic is, I think there's an Ellen White quote as well that backs it up. You have in the third decree in verse 4, talks about fountains of waters and rivers becoming blood. And then the angel says, thou art righteous, and then goes on to say, they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, for thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. And so this is kind of like, even though they're not able to kill the saints, that they're given blood in a sense because they had been trying to kill them at that stage.
Okay, but wouldn't this be, see, the way that I read that text is that that's referring to this plague being poured out, dealing with the blood, because of the martyrs that were killed before the close of probation. That's the way I've understood that.
Well, you could maybe relate that as well, but Ellen White, she does have a quote. She says that they're giving us your blood as if because even though they weren't able to kill the saints, it's as if they were, they're still getting that judgment.
Yeah.
As if they had killed them.
Yeah, well, definitely there's the anger because this is during the plagues. I mean, these people have their probation closed on them, both the righteous and the wicked. But in verse 16 or chapter 16, verse 7, it says, I heard another out of the altar say, even so, Lord God Almighty, true and righteous are thy judgments. So remember, the soul's under the altar, or the altar is connected with the martyrs. So when it talks about this judgment, this third plague that's poured out upon the rivers and fountains of waters and they became blood, this is God's judgment. He's actually beginning to avenge the martyrs, right? Because they have shed the blood of saints and prophets and thus given them blood to drink. But I would agree that there's definitely this anger against God's people during these plagues. But I don't know if I would then place the time of Jacob's trouble there. Because my understanding in reading Great Controversies, the time of Jacob's trouble is the sixth plague. And it's connected to the death decree in the Great Controversy. But we're going to have to come back to this as we go through this study. So what we've seen here is that there is all these spirit of prophecy statements referring us back to this time. But we can see that Ellen White's applying them to our time. Well, specifically to her time that she sees coming of the Sunday law. But we know that it's speaking of our time. These subjects are of the most importance. Urge our people to consider them carefully. When they do this, their minds will be so fully occupied with matters of eternal consequence that they will lose sight of the little differences that once annoyed them. They will realize that prophecy is even now fulfilling. If the minds of the people of God were not occupied with things of minor consequence, they would see that the signs of the times are fast fulfilling, and that events of the greatest consequence are then to them are taking place in the world and in the churches, pointed out by the words, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. So where's she quoting there?
That's Revelation 18, verse 2.
Yeah, so it's Revelation 18, and we apply that to 9/11. God has warned his people of the perils before them. John beholds the things which will be in the last days, and he sees a people working counter to God. Read Revelation 12, 17, 14, 10 to 13, and chapter 17 and 13. John sees the company who have been deceived. He says, I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. So she's just going to quote this again, Revelation 16, 13 to 15. Under the symbols of a great red dragon, a leopard-like beast, and a beast with lamb-like horns, the earthly governments, which would especially engage in trampling upon God's law and persecuting his people, were presented to John. So that's Revelation 12, the leopard-like beast, and the beast with lamb-like horns. Those are Revelation 13. The war is carried on till the close of time. The people of God, symbolized by a holy woman and her children, were represented as greatly in the minority. In the last days, only a remnant still existed. Of these, John speaks as they which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. So what is she talking about here? This people of God symbolized by a holy woman with her children and her children. What's chapter is that? What verse is that she's referring to?
12.
Okay, right. So in chapter 12, we see this woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, a crown of 12 stars. And we know that this is going to apply to the time of Christ, because the context is the great red dragon, which is pagan Rome, even though it's primarily a symbol of Satan. And there's going to be this man-child, but there's also going to be the seed of the woman, and the seed there that's going to flee from this flood that comes out after it from the dragon is God's people during the 1260 years. And they're going to end up in the United States. And at the end of the 1260, the United States is going to rise, right? So chapter 12 has this history, and chapter 13 then comes to the end of the 1260. So instead of the great red dragon, you're going to see this leopard-like beast. right? And the beast with the lamb-like horns. So that's what she's talking about here. She says, through paganism and then through the papacy, Satan exerted his power for many centuries in an effort to blot from the earth God's faithful witnesses. Pagans and papists were actuated by the same dragon spirit. They differed only in that the papacy, making a pretense of serving God, was the more dangerous and cruel foe. Through the agency of Romanism, Satan took the world captive. The professed Church of God was swept into the ranks of this delusion. And for more than 1,000 years, the people of God suffered under the dragon's ire. And when the papacy, robbed of its strength, was forced to desist from persecution, John beheld a new power coming up to echo the dragon's voice and carry forward the same cruel and blasphemous work. This power, the last that is to wage war against the church and the law of God, was symbolized by a beast with lamb-like horns. But the stern tracing of the prophetic pencil reveals a change in this peaceful scene. The beast with lamb-like horns speaks with the voice of a dragon and exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him. Prophecy declares that he will say to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, and that he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Thus Protestantism follows in the steps of the papacy. So when we look at the principle here, and we look at the United States and we talk about Protestantism, what is it that we're talking about? Is this truly Protestantism?
Apostate.
It's apostate Protestantism. And is the United States a Protestant country?
Name anyway.
Okay, in name, right? It was founded as a Protestant country with a Republican form of government. And we have Republicans and Democrats. For the most part, to be an American politician, you would usually be a Protestant. I mean, there's always exceptions, and we usually note them when a Catholic would become the president, for instance. And most of them would attend Protestant churches, but they're not really Protestants. And America is kind of a strange place to me. I mean, in order to get elected, pretty much you have to be religious. I mean, it's changing, but you at least have to make a pretense of religion. I mean, if you want to get the vote, you need to go to church, and you need to make it look like you're a family man. You have a Christian home, at least on the outside. But we can see then that Protestantism in this context is not what we would call Protestantism. It's apostate. And that's where the United States is today. Now, who's being opposed to the vaccination in the United States?
That's kind of a broad question.
Yeah. Okay. It would be a broad group of people that are opposed to getting vaccinated, both Republicans and Democrats, correct?
More Republicans than Democrats, but yes.
Okay. Well, I know that only 83% of Black people are not vaccinated and do not want to be vaccinated. Roughly about that. Let's say 80%. The number I saw was 83. And they would primarily be Democrats.
Which is a sad situation. And I say that's sad because it was during the Civil War, it was the Democrats that sought to keep the blacks in slavery.
Mhm.
Now, the ones that I'm running into and that I am very surprised with
Mhm.
are those that have gone through training within Adventist schools, especially in nursing, because they are ones that are being very proactively supportive of taking the jab.
Mhm. Yeah, and so you're going to find all kinds that part of my point is that it's not a you don't have like Republicans not getting vaccinated, Democrats getting vaccinated, even though you might say maybe there's less Republicans getting vaccinated. But you're also not going to see that Protestant churches are opposed to vaccination generally. So, so the question kind of is, well, who's actually being opposed to it and why? And it's not necessarily easy to figure out with the media, because everything's political and things are highly misrepresented. But you definitely have a number of people who are opposed to, even if they've been vaccinated, they're opposed to the idea of the vaccination being forced. And this would be a cross section of Americans from what I can see. So the question is, what is the issue? Because we're Seventh-day Adventists and we look at the vaccination thing in a certain light. But what is the issue that's being expressed? Is it a Protestant principle that is leading people to not want to get vaccinated? Let's ask that question.
Yeah, it's personal choice.
Okay.
Yes, agreed.
So that would be a Protestant principle, wouldn't it? Whether the person recognizes it or not, what they're expressing when they say, it should be up to the individual to decide what they want to do. They're being Protestants, even if they don't necessarily believe in God or have, a deep religious faith. So we can say regarding what's happening that the principles connected to the Sunday law are being manifest in what's happening with the vaccination, correct?
I would agree.
Okay, so the line of prophecy in which these symbols are found begins with Revelation 12, with the dragon that sought to destroy Christ at his birth. The dragon is said to be Satan. He it was that moved upon Herod to put the Savior to death, but the chief agent of Satan in making war upon Christ and his people during the final centuries of the Christian era was the Roman Empire, in which paganism was the prevailing religion. Thus, while the dragon primarily represents Satan, it is, in a secondary sense, a symbol of Rome. So we're very familiar with that statement, but it's nice to see it sort of in its whole context here. Ellen White's giving a really nice interpretation of Revelation 12 and leading into Revelation 13. In the scene representing the work of Christ for us and the determined accusation of Satan against us, Joshua stands as the high priest and makes request in behalf of God's commandment-keeping people. At the same time, Satan represents the people of God as great sinners and presents before God the list of sins he has tempted them to commit through their lifetime, and urges that because of their transgressions, they be given into his hands to destroy. He urges that they should not be protected by ministering angels against the confederacy of evil. He is full of anger because he cannot bind the people of God into bundles with the world to render to him complete allegiance. Kings and rulers and governors have placed upon themselves the brand of Antichrist and are represented as the dragon who goes to make war with the saints, with those who keep the commandments of God and who have the faith of Jesus. In their enmity against the people of God, they show themselves guilty also of the choice of Barabbas instead of Christ. God has a controversy with the world. When the judgment shall sit and the books shall be opened, he has an awful account to settle, which would now make the world fear and tremble were men not blinded and bewitched by satanic delusions and deceptions. God will call the world to account for the death of his only begotten Son, whom, to all intents and purposes, the world has crucified afresh and put to an open shame in the persecution of his people. The world has rejected Christ in the person of his saints. He has refused his messages, in the refusal of the messages of prophets, apostles, and messengers. They have rejected those who have been co-laborers with Christ, and for this, they will have to render an account. Now, one of the things in following what's happening right now in the United States is there a pushback to Biden's whatever it is, it's not really a law. What do they call what Biden did in
A mandate.
a mandate? Now, what is that exactly?
Well, okay, a law is when a decision is made that is passed through the Congress, signed by the president, and then is adjudged by the court system as being a valid pronouncement of something that people are to do.
Yeah, it has to go through a legislative process.
Correct. In this case, it needs to go through all three branches of the government in order to be considered as being valid.
Yeah.
The situation with a mandate,
Mhm.
it is a pronouncement of a party that this is something that is necessary. It is a direction not supported by law. It is a direction not supported in equity. It is as some would look at this, a kingly pronouncement.
Okay. Yeah, because when I use the term mandate, it's always, at least in Canada, it's always come from the people given to the government on how it's supposed to act. So the government has to have a mandate. The government can't mandate anything. So I don't understand the legal implications of Biden just making this, well, this is going to happen. Well, nobody has to follow it, do they?
The truth of it is that no one needs to follow it. The problem is the herd is so scared that they're going to give their freedom in order to be considered safe.
Okay.
So, and as Benjamin Franklin very sagely said almost 200 years ago, those that will trade their freedom for their safety are deserving of neither.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it just really puzzles me, I guess, that he can just basically decide that, businesses with 100 employees or more have to vaccinate their employees or they're going to be fined. And it's like, well, not everybody's going to go along with that.
No.
Well, they set the principle in place with what has been widely considered a joke, but it's called Obamacare. Obamacare was going to fine businesses that did not direct that people were to pay for this healthcare coverage. I mean, the problem that I had, and I still have, regarding whether you call it Obamacare or you call it Biden care, which I find to be a joke, is that a male of the age that can obtain this supposed coverage was required to pay for abortions.
What?
That's actually part of the situation, because part of the money that you pay every month is to go to fund abortions.
Yeah.
So this with the mandates, especially the mandates that Biden and other National Socialist governors are promoting, it's more a grab for power, because if these parties can continue to scare the population, they believe that they're going to have more control.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing in the United States is, and the world's becoming extremely political. But all of these issues, you know, when I look at them, they're not really, for most people, they're not really about what's healthy. It has to do with party politics or political beliefs of what position you're going to take regarding vaccines, what position you're going to take regarding the pandemic and different actions. I mean, people who are wearing masks, you could sort of tell which political stripe people are by how they appear in public. Like if they don't need to wear masks and they're wearing masks in public, then, you know, they're making a statement. So, but also the science is completely ignored. It's all just political, whether it comes to the treatments or whether it comes to the vaccine, or whether it comes to whether people who have already had COVID, whether or not they're dangerous to the population or not. It's all about politics. So the question is, how does this relate to the Sunday law? Because I don't believe that this is the Sunday law right now. I don't believe that people are necessarily being tested of whether they're faithful to God or not. That is, I don't believe somebody who gets vaccinated is then taken this step that means that when the Sunday law crisis comes, they're going to cave, because it all depends on the person's motives on what they're doing.
Okay. As we talked briefly yesterday, and I'm not in disagreement with what you just said, so I'm putting that directly on the table. The health nugget that was presented on Sabbath was probably the most direct and was promoted and was presented in the most unemotional manner I have yet seen
Which is good.
any of these things presented.
Amen.
But what was chosen for this was a group of passages that can easily be found in Second Selected Messages, Appendix 1, Chapter 3.
Okay.
And the source material for this was a series of articles from the Review and Herald from August 15th of 1899 to September 12th of 1899.
Okay.
Now, the point of these documents from Mrs. White was to show, here is God's way in curing disease, here is man's way in curing disease.
Mhm.
The way in which God's way works is simple, it's natural, but it requires a level of faith, not in science falsely so called.
Right. And it's simple in that it's a lifestyle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, what I've been observing, and I have observed it very sadly, is many of those that are choosing right now within the Adventist Church to go ahead and accept this inoculation are also coming right back out and proceeding to press others to do exactly what they've already done.
Mhm,
They have turned their back on what Mrs. White has stated.
mhm.
So I would have to almost say that this is a type of a test. Are we willing to trust God, or are we going to trust man?
Mhm.
Mhm. Which I would agree there. I'm just saying that there are circumstances in which people may decide to be vaccinated, not because they don't trust God, but because they may believe that being vaccinated is going to be less of a risk to the people they're caring for.
Well,
And whether they're right or not, I mean, and that's part of the thing for me when I say I don't think it's as clear cut an issue as people make it, in that people are going based on information that they have, and not everybody has the same information or trusts the same sources. But I would agree that the real issue here has to do with the force or the removal of freedom of conscience. Because even people who have been vaccinated would stand with the idea that people should not be forced to be vaccinated.
there are some
Yeah,
that will agree with that.
yeah, there are some. And
Okay,
and actually I know lots, on the internet, people who are commentators who've been vaccinated themselves and who believe in vaccination, but don't believe that people should be forced to be vaccinated.
all
And
right.
right. And some of them are employers, and they're not going to force their employees to be vaccinated, even because they have more than 100 employees. They're not going to do that, and they're going to fight it in courts as employers. So they're going to support their employees who don't want to be vaccinated, even though they themselves believe in vaccination. So for me, the issue is we have two different issues, I guess, in a sense. You have within Adventism, are we going to trust in God? Well, I think, that's pretty clear that we trust that if we're following God's laws, that our health is going to be protected. And I've always been of the opinion, that doctors, they're fine if you've been in a car accident. They're fine to maybe, if you have some health problem, to sort of assess what's going wrong. So they're good at diagnosing, illness. But I'm not really too hepped up on the treatments that they offer. Though there are some treatments at times that are necessary. But, the idea of, constantly taking drugs for every little symptom that you have is definitely not wise, especially when those symptoms can usually be connected to a deeper problem that is just an overall problem with your health because you're not following God's health laws. But, modern medicine treats symptoms, not so much disease. But, in this issue, we can see that this is what Ellen White's laying out here is the great controversy. And the question is, how does what's happening now relate to that? And how does it relate to the Sunday law? So we may be tested in different ways as different individuals. And some of the ways that we're being tested have nothing to do with the pandemic or the vaccine itself, but our reaction to it.
Well, let's use a simpler situation.
Okay.
I've had opportunity over the last several years, as I have been reading further in Spirit of Prophecy,
Mhm.
to go to different services in different Adventist churches.
Mhm.
Now, those of us that view these meetings and that participate, I believe it is very direct that we all agree that Ellen White is a prophet,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Agreed.
Now, my question is that if Ellen White is a prophet, why is the Adventist church, the majority conservative, liberal, whatever you want to call them, why are they continuing in the use of cheese on their tables during potlucks?
That's the conundrum.
Yeah,
Well,
never.
it's not, on that, Heidi, I would have to disagree. It's not a conundrum. It's that they're basically blowing off what Ellen White has stated.
Yeah, well, the question is, why do they do that? I mean,
Yeah.
we don't have that in Warburg Church, but
Okay. But see, in many of the churches that I've attended, whether I have been in Washington, whether I've been in Oregon, whether I've been in New Mexico,
if they're conservative churches, they still have cheese.
yeah.
That's
Okay.
weird.
And Mrs. White's very clear. Cheese has no place on our table, right? And
Yeah.
that's a quote.
Mhm.
So why? And the question is that many of these, even in the conservative Adventist churches, are choosing to set aside willingly a simple direction from Mrs. White.
Mhm.
Now, I have run into a few people that are saying, take the vaccine, but you have a right to not take the vaccine. I have several others that I'm seeing post on a regular basis that are saying, you idiots, take the vaccine because it's for your own good. It's for the best, it's for the good of all humanity.
Mhm.
Well, I see this and I shake my head, especially when it's coming from other Adventists.
Mhm.
Now, I know personally of a group that has stated, well, you've got to have the vaccine because the conference has approved it.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't fly with me, but
It doesn't fall, it does not track with me whatsoever.
yeah, it's usually if the conference is for it, I'm kind of against it. But anyway,
Agreed.
that's just, I haven't found that they've had many good things to say when it comes to, how we should act. So let's go on and read a little bit more here because we don't got much more time today. I'm going to skip that Revelation 17 section. All society is ranging into two great classes, the obedient and the disobedient. Among which class shall we be found? Those who keep God's commandments, those who live not by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God, compose the church of the living God. Those who choose to follow Antichrist are subjects of the great apostate. Ranged under the banner of Satan, they break God's law and lead others to break it. They endeavored so to frame the laws of nations that men shall show their loyalty to earthly governments by trampling upon the laws of God's kingdom. Satan is diverting minds with unimportant questions in order that they shall not, with clear and distinct vision, see matters of vast importance. The enemy is planning to ensnare the world. The so-called Christian world is to be the theater of great and decisive actions. Men in authority will enact laws controlling the conscience after the example of the papacy. Babylon will make all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Every nation will be involved. Of this time, John the Revelator declares, and then she quotes Revelation 18, verse 3 to 7, right? And then, so when we look at the issue, the issue is much deeper than what we see on the surface. And we can all agree to that.
Definitely.
Because they
I
have
don't
to do,
disagree.
because it has to do with character. It has to do with the thoughts and intents of the heart, the motives that underlie our actions. And we can have people on the surface appear to be supporting truth, but they can be doing it for the wrong reason. Because Satan has a trap for every person. And right now, with the Democrats in charge in the United States, you have people being opposed to what's happening with the vaccine. But what if Trump had been in charge and was, because he's the one who brought the vaccine into play. And remember that there were Democrats who weren't going to get vaccinated because it was Trump's vaccine. I don't know if we have a memory that goes back that far.
Mhm.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
And Republicans who were supporting the vaccine because it was from Trump. But once the government changed, people changed their positions. And so are we just taking positions because of politics? Are we taking taking positions because of principle? Because policy or politics is not the same as principle. So
Okay,
yeah,
let's use our memory for just a little bit.
okay.
At the outset, no matter where we were, the comment was made, we must do this for a couple of weeks to flatten the curve.
Yeah, this has been the longest 2 weeks of my life.
Agreed. It has definitely been the longest 2 weeks of my life. But what's happening right now is those that are currently in power are seeking to hold on to that power at all costs. That means if they have to continue scaring people to maintain that power, they want the fear to continue.
Right. And it'll be true of the other. See, the thing is, fear is on both sides.
Right.
And, you know, and that's the thing that bothers me the most is that people are frightened, whether they're people who are frightened of the virus or people who are frightened of the vaccine. It's still the same type of fear, and they're still being motivated by the same motives. They're not that different. It's just where they stand politically for the most part is what I see. Now, you know, if we're going to truly be subjects of God's kingdom and not subjects of the great apostate, as Ellen White's talking about here, you know, what's going to be the difference? And this definitely has to be, you know, dealing with the heart, not so much with, I mean, the mind's involved, but when I mean the heart, I mean the way in which we make our decisions. Are we following God because we love God, or are we following self? And so many people have this position of what's happening right now and have the view that if I act in such and such a way, then I've somehow passed some test and I'm God's children. But we can see it's not as clear cut as that. And as we approach the Sunday law, people will be surprised at what decisions people make as that time comes. I mean, I would agree that Adventists who don't accept the spirit of prophecy and trust in the government and trust in what the church says are on dangerous ground. But the question is, are we on any less dangerous ground just because we see what they're doing wrong? Or are we just on a different type of dangerous ground?
Well, each of us has to make a decision.
Mhm.
Now, when I read this passage with Mrs. White regarding cheese not being fit for our tables,
Mhm.
it reinforced a situation for me that has gone back through most of my life.
Mhm.
It was well over 45 years ago that I was having to undergo quite a number of treatments by a dermatologist because they couldn't figure out why I was having such a hard time regarding acne.
Yeah.
Well,
Cheese.
all of it had to do with cheese,
Yeah.
because my skin was trying to get rid of the issues that were coming up from my diet. And what was really a sad situation at that point in time, as I was at the academy,
Mhm.
the majority of the diet that they were giving to the kids at that time involved cheese.
Wow.
Now, I had to get special permission because I had a doctor's written instruction that I could not partake of what they were offering. So I had to get permission to be able to cook for myself. And that created quite an issue within the dorm.
Wow.
Now, from there and going forward, as I've come to accept Mrs. White as a prophet, I've found many things that required me to make changes within my life and within my diet.
Mhm.
All of this is a personal choice for us, each one.
Mhm. And we have to study, and we come under conviction, and then we continue to make the changes in our lives as we have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, if we don't choose to study, if our attitude, as I've been seeing sadly from many friends, is to just take whatever the government tells us to do, then we're putting man on the throne of our life versus God.
Mhm.
And yes, it can be a situation where later people can make that change, but they have to want to.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the position that I'm taking with all of this.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's a personal decision based upon a person's knowledge and conviction.
Agreed.
And God judges the hearts and the motives in this case. It's not as clear cut as a Sunday law in that sense, but it is a type of a Sunday law in that it's taking, the government is taking power to set aside individual rights and freedom of conscience.
Agreed.
And even though it may not appear to be a religious issue, it is connected to a large degree with many people for religious reasons. Though many people at this point, they've taken a stand against a vaccine, even though they've vaccinated their kids and taken vaccines before. But this issue comes up because of how it's being promoted and because of the fear that exists. So maybe some people have changed their minds about vaccines. They didn't see them as a problem in the past, but now they say, well, this is different. And that's fine too.
Well, okay. The last time I accepted a vaccine that the government mandated was necessary, I had not been choosing to do my due diligence to do my own research.
Well, I was only 7 the last time I received a vaccine, so, or not 7,
Well,
I was in grade 7, so I was like 13.
Okay. There was a flu vaccine that was being offered. You must, if you get the vaccine, you won't get the flu.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this one particular year, I got the vaccine. Well, it did its job. I got the flu. I got the flu so badly, I was literally in bed for 10 days.
Yeah.
Now, doing my research later,
Yeah.
I found that this particular vaccine was being produced after it had been injected into a living host organism, and that they manufactured that vaccine from the blood of the host organism.
Hmm.
But that there were many of the Jewish faith in New York that had chosen not to accept that vaccine because the living host organism was a pig.
Ah.
So the blood was porcine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I used to work in a hospital, and, you're supposed to be vaccinated. Flu vaccine comes around, and I just objected. I said, no, I'm not going to take the vaccine. And back then it was okay. It's kind of bizarre, but there were some other people who didn't take the vaccine either. But I just have never seen a need to get a flu vaccine, because I've never really had a problem with the flu. I've got sick before, but that's fine. I don't mind getting sick. Flu kills people who are at risk, very old people usually, people with all kinds of health problems. So, and I don't see in this case, COVID is really no different. It's not something that the average person should fear. But the point here is, right, where Ellen White says, these have one mind, there will be a universal bond of union, one great harmony, a confederacy of Satan's forces, and shall give their power and strength to the beast. Thus is manifest the same arbitrary, oppressive power against religious liberty, freedom to worship God according to the dictates of conscience, as was manifested by the papacy when in the past it persecuted those who dared to refuse to conform with the religious rites and ceremonies of Romanism. In the warfare to be waged in the last days, there will be united in opposition to God's people all the corrupt powers that have apostatized from allegiance to the law of Jehovah. In this warfare, the Sabbath of the fourth commandment will be the great point at issue. It is for in the Sabbath commandment, the great lawgiver identifies himself as the creator of the heavens and the earth. So when we look at the Sunday law, this is what I would call a clear-cut matter. I don't think you could argue that the Sunday law is something where people can have reasons to accept Sunday and not accept the Sabbath. You understand what I'm saying? That we don't see this presently with the vaccine. We can argue that there's really good reasons not to get it, and that that many people in choosing to get it are setting aside their allegiance to God or their faith and trust in God, but not everyone. But when it comes to the Sunday Sabbath issue, it is the final test for God's people. It is something that's clear cut. I don't know if everybody would agree with me on that, but I think it's the only place where it becomes clear cut. Before that, it may not be clear cut. People may not see what's happening. We can see that what's happening with this pandemic and the forces of government, to force us, that this is leading to a Sunday law. But it's not the Sunday law itself.
Okay, can we agree on this point?
Yeah.
The image on the plain of Dura is being constructed.
Mm-hmm.
We have not yet come to the point where we have been called to worship.
Right.
But the image is fully within our view.
Yeah. There definitely what we see is the image of the beast is forming.
Okay.
And so we're in that period of time. And we already understood this long before, because even if you go back to 2017, when Jeff was talking about, Raphi and Penium and the pandemic, we saw that it arose between midnight and the midnight cry. Now, of course, that we didn't understand which line that was, because we thought that was the line of the Levites, but it's something within our line. And so this becomes a type, because we know our line is typical. So this becomes a type of what's going to happen. And now we're seeing unfold. And I would say, especially since January 6th, we're seeing unfolding of this basically tyranny that's occurring in the United States and in the world. It's just something that shouldn't happen. You shouldn't have governments trying to force people to do something they don't want to do. and to create false reasons for doing that. Because I know in my case, I've had COVID. I'm more immune than somebody who's had 3 vaccines. All the scientists say so. Actually, I'm 13 times less likely to get COVID, according to an observational study in Israel, than somebody who's been vaccinated, has had full vaccination. So I'm 13 times less likely, or they're 13 times more likely to get COVID than I am. And yet they would want to force someone like me to get a vaccine. Basically, if I was living in the United States and I had a job and, I couldn't be hired, that could put somebody on the street. People would be put on the street, but the government wouldn't even care. Right? So, it's just a crazy world we live in right now. That's for sure.
It seems to me that if for something of this nature, so much complexity in the whole process, the whole issue, could be brought about by the world.
Mhm.
What more for Adventists particularly will be the issue of the Sunday law and complexity. Now, Satan is going.
Yeah. And especially if you have the church urging Adventists to keep Sunday, as that will happen.
Yeah, it just looks to me like the complexity is going to be high, especially for Adventists.
Mhm. But as far as understanding what we need to do, it's going to be simple: Sabbath and Sunday. There isn't going to be someone who has chosen to keep Sunday who has done so unwittingly and just been, wrong, took the wrong side, but has a good character. It'll be very clear cut that those who stand with the truth will be Sabbath keepers, and that those that stand with Sunday will be opposed to God. And in that sense, it's a real clear-cut issue. It's going to be very complex, but it's going to be based upon character. And so people will see what characters are being manifest. So thanks for that comment there, Chris. Okay, let's close with prayer. I went a little over time. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for this study. We ask that your Holy Spirit can help us as we go through this study throughout the next couple of weeks or so. And we pray for each person who's struggling with these issues. Help us to recognize, Lord, that you are in charge. Help us to commit our lives to you each day, to be obedient in the little things that you give us to do. May your angels watch over each one. May your Holy Spirit bring conviction and power in our lives. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.